Grandpa never let anyone into his barn, but after his death the family discovered why. What they found inside changed everything they thought they knew about him and brought tears to everyone who learned the truth. Subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments where you're watching this video from. The barn stood at the edge of the property like a sentinel that had weathered too many seasons. Its red paint faded to a dull rust color that blended with the autumn leaves scattered across the gravel driveway. The land itself stretched for nearly 12 acres, most of it wild now, overtaken by tall grasses and clusters of oak trees that had grown thick and gnarled over the decades. From the main road, you could barely see the farmhouse, a two-story structure with white siding that had yellowed with age, and a porch that sagged slightly on the left side. But the barn, that was visible from everywhere on the property, standing tall and stubborn, its double doors chained shut with a lock so old it had turned green with oxidation. Walter Brennan had owned this land for 47 years before his heart finally gave out on a Tuesday morning in late September. He was 73 years old, a retired postal worker who had spent the better part of his life delivering mail through rain, snow, and blazing summer heat to the rural communities outside of Millbrook. His granddaughter Sarah found him in his armchair, the television still playing the morning news, his reading glasses perched on his nose, and a cup of tea gone cold on the side table. He looked peaceful. She would tell everyone later, as if he had simply drifted off while contemplating something far away. Sarah was 26, a graphic designer who worked remotely from her apartment in the city, about 2 hours south of Millbrook. She had visited her grandfather every few weeks, sometimes staying the weekend, helping him with groceries or fixing things around the house that his aging hands could no longer manage. Her father, Michael, Walter's only son, lived even farther away in another state entirely and rarely made the trip. There had been some falling out years ago, something neither of them spoke about, a silence that had calcified into permanent distance. But Sarah had always felt drawn to the old man, to his quiet wisdom and the way he listened more than he spoke, nodding thoughtfully as she told him about her work, her failed relationships, her dreams of one day illustrating children's books. Now, standing in the driveway with her father beside her, she felt the weight of that loss settle over her, like a heavy blanket. Michael had flown in the day after Walter's death, his face drawn and tired, his voice flat, as he made phone calls to funeral homes and lawyers. He moved through the house with the detached efficiency of someone inventorying a storage unit rather than the home where he had grown up. Sarah watched him with a mixture of sadness and frustration, wishing he would show something, anything beyond that cold practicality. The funeral had been small, attended mostly by other retirees from the post office and a few neighbors who remembered Walter as the man who always waved from his porch and kept his property neat despite living alone. Afterward, Sarah and Michael returned to the house to begin the process of sorting through Walter's belongings. The lawyer had explained that the property would go to Michael as the sole heir, though Walter had left a small sum of money specifically for Sarah, enough to cover a year's rent or perhaps fund that illustration course she had mentioned wanting to take. Inside, the house smelled of old wood and the faint lingering scent of the pipe tobacco Walter had smoked on occasion, though his doctor had told him to quit years ago. The furniture was simple, functional, pieces that looked like they had been bought in the 70s and never replaced. Photographs lined the mantel above the fireplace, black and white images of a young Walter in his postal uniform, standing beside a mail truck, smiling with the easy confidence of a man who knew his place in the world. There were pictures of Michael as a boy, gap-toothed and sunburned, holding up a fish he had caught in the pond that used to be on the property before it dried up. And there were several of Sarah herself, more recent, her college graduation, a Christmas dinner, a snapshot of her and Walter standing in front of the barn, though the doors behind them were closed, as they always were. She stared at that photograph for a long moment, remembering the day it was taken. She had asked him casually what he kept in there. He had smiled, that gentle, knowing smile of his, and said simply, "Things I'm not ready to share yet." She hadn't pressed. It wasn't her way. But the curiosity had stayed with her, a quiet question that never quite left the back of her mind. Michael found her there, still holding the frame. "We need to go through everything," he said, his tone suggesting it was a chore to be completed as quickly as possible. "The realtor says the house could sell faster if we clear it out first." Sarah set the photograph down carefully. "You're selling it? What else would I do with it?" Michael replied, already moving toward the kitchen. "I can't move back here, and neither can you. It's just land, Sarah, just a house." She didn't argue, though the words felt wrong, dismissive of something she couldn't quite name. Instead, she followed him through the rooms, boxing up clothes, dishes, books that smelled of dust and time. They worked in near silence, the only sounds the creak of floorboards and the rustle of packing paper. By late afternoon, the living room was filled with cardboard boxes, labeled in Michael's neat handwriting, "Donate, trash, keep." As the sun began to dip lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the yard, Sarah found herself standing at the kitchen window, looking out toward the barn. The light hit it at an angle, making the old wood glow faintly, almost golden. She thought about all the times she had visited, all the times she had seen her grandfather walking toward that building with a sense of purpose, carrying nothing, returning an hour or two later with that same quiet expression on his face. "What do you think is in there?" she asked, not turning around. Michael, sorting through a drawer of old bills and receipts, didn't look up. "Probably farm equipment, tools, junk he never threw away." "He never farmed," Sarah said. "Not the whole time I've known him." "Then I don't know," Michael said, his patience clearly thinning. "Does it matter?" Sarah turned to face him. "Don't you want to know?" He finally looked up, meeting her eyes. For a moment, she thought she saw something there, a flicker of the same curiosity she felt. But then it was gone, replaced by that same tired resignation. "I want to get this done and go home," he said quietly. "That's all." But Sarah couldn't let it go. That night, after Michael had gone to bed in Walter's old room, she lay awake on the couch, staring at the ceiling, listening to the house settle around her. The barn called to her in a way she couldn't explain, a pull that felt almost physical. She thought of her grandfather's words, "Things I'm not ready to share yet." The past tense of that sentence hung in her mind. He was gone now. Whatever he had been protecting, whatever secret he had kept locked away for so long, it was waiting to be discovered. And she knew, with a certainty that surprised her, that she would be the one to open that door. Morning came slowly, the sky turning from deep purple to pale grey before the sun finally broke through the clouds. Sarah woke stiff and unrested, her neck aching from the angle she had slept at on the couch. The house was quiet, almost unnaturally so, as if it were holding its breath. She could hear Michael moving around upstairs, the creak of floorboards, the sound of water running through old pipes. She rose, folded the blanket she had used, and made her way to the kitchen to start coffee. Through the window above the sink, she could see the barn clearly in the morning light. The dew had settled on the grass, making everything look fresh and clean despite the wildness of it. Birds called from the trees, their songs overlapping in a chorus that felt both cheerful and melancholy. She poured herself a cup of coffee and stood there, warming her hands on the mug, trying to work up the courage to say what she had decided during the night. When Michael came down, dressed in jeans and an old sweater, she turned to face him. "I want to open the barn," she said before he could speak. He paused, reaching for a mug from the cupboard. "Why?" "Because it's the only place we haven't looked," she said. "Because he kept it locked for a reason, and I think we should know what that reason was before we sell everything." Michael poured his coffee slowly, considering. "It's probably nothing, Sarah. Probably just stuff he was embarrassed about. Old magazines, broken furniture, who knows? Then we'll know," she pressed. "But what if it's not nothing? What if there's something important in there?" He sighed, running a hand through his hair, a gesture she recognized from childhood, something he did when he was tired of arguing. "Fine, we'll open it. But if it's full of rusty tools and mouse droppings, I don't want to hear about it." They finished their coffee in silence and then made their way outside. The air was cool, carrying the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves. The barn loomed larger as they approached, its shadow stretching across the ground. The chain that held the double doors shut was thick and heavy, the padlock ancient but still solid. Michael tried the key from Walter's key ring, the one labelled with a piece of masking tape that simply said barn, but it wouldn't turn. The lock was either rusted shut or the key was wrong. "We'll have to cut it," Michael said, already heading back toward the garage where Walter kept his tools. He returned with a pair of bolt cutters, large and industrial, the kind meant for serious work. It took 3 attempts, his face reddening with effort, before the chain finally gave way with a sharp metallic snap that echoed across the property. The sound startled a crow from a nearby tree, its cawing harsh and accusatory as it flew away. Michael pulled the chain free and let it drop to the ground. For a moment they both stood there, staring at the doors. Sarah felt her heart beating faster, a strange mixture of excitement and apprehension coursing through her. She thought of her grandfather again, of his hands on these same doors, closing them, locking them, keeping whatever was inside hidden from the world. "Ready?" Michael asked, his voice softer now, as if he too felt the gravity of the moment. She nodded, and together they pulled the doors open. The hinges groaned, loud and protesting, and then the darkness inside gave way to the morning light that spilled across the threshold. What they saw made them both stop breathing. The barn was not what they expected. It was not filled with rusting equipment or forgotten furniture. Instead, the entire space had been transformed into something else entirely, something that spoke of care and dedication and countless hours of work. The walls had been lined with shelves, floor to ceiling, and every shelf was filled with books. Not just any books, but children's books, hundreds of them, maybe thousands, their colorful spines creating a rainbow effect that seemed almost magical in the soft light filtering through the high windows. But it wasn't just a library. In the center of the barn stood several long tables, each covered with art supplies, paints, brushes, stacks of paper, boxes of crayons and markers still in their packaging. There were small chairs arranged around the tables, child-sized, painted in bright primary colors. Along one wall hung a series of drawings, clearly made by children, taped up in neat rows, each one depicting scenes of animals, families, houses with smoking chimneys, suns with smiling faces. Sarah walked forward slowly, her hand covering her mouth, tears already forming in her eyes. Michael followed, his expression stunned, all his earlier dismissiveness gone. They moved through the space like people in a dream, touching the books, reading the spines, finding titles they remembered from their own childhoods mixed with newer publications. On a small desk near the back, Sarah found a ledger, the kind with columns for dates and names. She opened it carefully, her hands trembling. Inside, written in Walter's familiar, careful handwriting, were lists. Names of children, dates they had visited, notes about which books they had chosen, comments about their interests. The entries went back years, some more than a decade old. September 12th, 2011, she read aloud. Emma Rodriguez, age 7, chose Where the Wild Things Are, asked about ocean animals, left her a book about dolphins for next time. Michael picked up another notebook from the shelf above the desk. This one contained what appeared to be lesson plans, simple activities designed to encourage reading and creativity. There were templates for story prompts, ideas for art projects that connected to different books, even recipes for simple snacks written out in large, clear letters. He was teaching them, Michael said, his voice barely above a whisper. All this time, he was running some kind of program for kids. Sarah found a folder filled with photographs, snapshots of children sitting at the tables, reading, drawing, laughing. Walter appeared in some of them, sitting among the kids, a book open in his lap, his expression patient and warm. In one photo, a little girl with braids was showing him a drawing she had made, and the pride on both their faces was unmistakable. Beneath the photographs was a stack of letters, some in children's handwriting, others from adults. Sarah picked up the top one and began to read. Dear Mr. Walter, thank you for teaching my son to love reading. Before he met you, he struggled in school and hated books. Now he reads every night before bed, and his grades have improved so much. You changed his life. We will never forget your kindness. If you're watching this and feeling moved by Walter's secret, please subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell. We share stories like this every week, tales of hidden kindness and unexpected legacies that remind us of the good that exists in the world. And tell us in the comments, have you ever discovered something surprising about someone you loved after they were gone? We'd love to hear your stories. Now let's continue and find out what else Sarah and Michael discovered in that barn. Sarah set the letter down carefully, as if it was something fragile that might crumble at the slightest pressure. Her vision had blurred with tears, and she wiped them away quickly, trying to maintain some composure, even though her chest felt tight with emotion. Michael had moved to another corner of the barn, where a bulletin board hung on the wall, covered with newspaper clippings, certificates, and what appeared to be thank you cards made from construction paper and decorated with stickers and glitter. He unpinned one of the articles and held it up to the light. It was from the Millbrook Gazette, dated 6 years earlier. The headline read, "Local volunteer provides free literacy program for underserved children." Below it was a photograph of Walter standing in front of the barn, though the image had been taken from an angle that didn't reveal much of the interior. The article described how he had started the program on his own, reaching out to families in the area whose children struggled with reading or who couldn't afford tutoring or enrichment programs. "He never said a word," Michael murmured, reading through the article. "Not once did he mention any of this to me." Sarah joined him, reading over his shoulder. The article explained that Walter had been running the program every Saturday morning for nearly 15 years, that it had started with just 2 children from a neighboring farm and had grown to include as many as 20 kids some weekends. Parents would drop their children off, and Walter would spend hours with them, reading stories, helping with homework, encouraging them to explore their imaginations through art and writing. "Why wouldn't he tell us?" Sarah asked, though the question was more to herself than to Michael. "Why keep this hidden?" Michael shook his head slowly, still staring at the photograph of his father. "I don't know. Maybe he thought we wouldn't understand. Maybe he didn't want recognition." They continued exploring the barn, each discovery adding another layer to the portrait of a man they realized they had never fully known. There was a small refrigerator in one corner, unplugged now but clearly used at one time, probably to store snacks and drinks for the children. Beside it, a cabinet held boxes of crackers, juice boxes with expiration dates from months ago, and packages of cookies, all neatly organized. Sarah found another journal, this one more personal. The entries were shorter, more reflective. "Today, Marcus finally finished his first chapter book," one entry read. "He was so proud of himself. His mother cried when I told her. Sometimes I think this is the only thing I've ever done that truly mattered." Another entry, dated just 3 months before Walter's death, said simply, "My hands shake too much to hold the book steady now. I worry I won't be able to continue much longer, but I'm not ready to stop. These children need this place." The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. She thought of those final visits, how he had seemed more tired, how his hands had trembled when he poured tea, how he had paused sometimes mid-sentence as if gathering strength. She had noticed, but she hadn't understood. He had been fighting to keep this going, to maintain this sanctuary he had built, even as his body failed him. Michael found a file cabinet pushed against the back wall and opened the top drawer. Inside were folders, each labeled with a child's name. He pulled one out at random and flipped through it. It contained progress reports written in Walter's hand, noting improvements in reading levels, interests the child had expressed, books that had resonated with them. Some folders held drawings the children had made specifically for Walter, with messages scrawled in uneven letters. "Thank you, Mr. Walter. You are the best teacher. I love you." "There must be 50 folders here," Michael said, his voice thick. 50 kids whose lives he touched. Sarah moved to the windows at the far end of the barn, where the morning light was streaming in more strongly now. From there, she could see the entire space, the careful organization of it, the love that had gone into every detail. She noticed a small wooden sign above the main table, hand-painted in cheerful yellow letters. "Everyone has a story worth telling." She pointed it out to Michael, who joined her at the window. They stood together in silence, the weight of their discovery settling over them. This was Walter's true legacy, not the house or the land or the modest savings he had left behind, but this place and what it represented. All those Saturdays he had spent here, all those hours poured into children who weren't his own, all that quiet dedication that no one in his family had known about. "I used to think he was just lonely," Michael said finally, his voice breaking slightly. "After Mom died, I thought he was just passing time out here, hiding from the world. I never imagined he was doing something like this." "He wasn't hiding," Sarah said softly. "He was giving." They found more evidence of his work as they continued searching. A cardboard box filled with certificates of achievement he had made himself, printed on his old computer and signed with his name, ready to be handed out to children who reached certain reading milestones. A shelf of books that had been donated specifically for the program, each one stamped on the inside cover with the words, "Property of Walter's Reading Barn, donated by Friends of Literacy." In the desk drawer, Sarah discovered a letter that had never been sent, addressed to Michael. The envelope wasn't sealed, and though she hesitated, she felt compelled to read it. The letter was dated 2 months before Walter's death. "Dear Michael," it began. "I know we haven't spoken properly in years, and I take responsibility for that. I've never been good at bridging distances, either the physical kind or the kind that grows between people who love each other but don't know how to say it. I wanted you to know about the work I've been doing here, about the children I've taught, and the small difference I hope I've made. I started this program after your mother passed because I needed purpose, something to remind me that life continues and that there is still good work to be done in the world. I wish I had told you about it sooner. I wish many things. But mostly, I wish you could see that the measure of a life isn't in grand gestures or accumulated wealth, but in the quiet moments when we choose to show up for each other. I hope someday you'll understand why I kept this private. It wasn't about secrecy. It was about preserving something pure, something that belonged to the children and to me, something that couldn't be complicated by explanations or expectations. If you're reading this, it means I'm gone. I hope you'll consider continuing what I started. The children still need this place. They always will." Sarah handed the letter to Michael without a word. She watched his face as he read, saw the emotions play across his features, grief, regret, understanding, and something that might have been redemption. When he finished, he folded the letter carefully and slipped it into his pocket. "We can't sell this place," he said, his voice steady now, certain. "We can't let this end." Sarah felt relief wash over her, so powerful it made her knees weak. "No," she agreed, "we can't." Indeed, they spent the rest of the morning in the barn, reading through more of the journals and letters, piecing together the full scope of what Walter had created. They learned that he had partnered quietly with the local elementary school, that teachers would sometimes refer struggling students to him, that he had never charged a single family for his time or materials. They found receipts showing that he had spent thousands of dollars of his own money over the years on books and supplies, money that should have gone to his own comfort, but that he had redirected toward this mission he had taken on. By early afternoon, they had begun to formulate a plan, sitting at one of the small tables designed for children, their knees awkwardly high, surrounded by the colorful books and drawings that represented years of Walter's hidden life. Michael had pulled out his phone and was taking notes, his earlier exhaustion replaced by a focused energy that Sarah hadn't seen in him for years. "We need to contact the families," he said, scrolling through the names in Walter's ledger. "They deserve to know what happened, why the program stopped. Some of these kids probably showed up on Saturdays and found the place locked." Sarah winced at the thought. Children arriving excited for their weekly visit, only to discover the barn closed. No explanation, no goodbye. "We should have come sooner," she said quietly. "Right after he died, we should have checked." "We didn't know," Michael replied, though his tone carried its own weight of regret. "But we know now, and we can do something about it." They decided to start by reaching out to the local school to find the teachers Walter had worked with. Sarah remembered seeing a name mentioned several times in his journals, Mrs. Patricia Chen, a third-grade teacher who had apparently sent many students his way over the years. There was a phone number written in the margin of one entry, and though it might be outdated, it was a place to start. Michael made the call while Sarah continued sorting through the materials, trying to create an inventory of what was there. The phone rang several times before a woman's voice answered, cautious and professional. Michael introduced himself, explained who he was, and then there was a long silence on the other end of the line. "Mr. Brennan passed away?" the woman finally said, her voice suddenly fragile. "Oh no, oh the children. They've been asking about him. We thought maybe he was ill or that he'd decided to stop the program, but we didn't know how to reach him. He was always so private about his personal information." Michael put the phone on speaker so Sarah could hear. Mrs. Chen continued, her words tumbling out in a rush of grief and concern. She explained that Walter had been a fixture in the community for so long that his absence had been deeply felt. Several children had regressed in their reading progress without his support, and parents had been calling the school asking if anyone knew when Mr. Walter would return. "He changed lives," Mrs. Chen said, her voice thick with emotion. "I've been teaching for 28 years, and I've never met anyone who gave so selflessly. He didn't do it for recognition or thanks. He did it because he genuinely loved helping children discover the joy of reading. He told me once that every child deserves to feel like their story matters, that their voice deserves to be heard." Sarah felt tears sliding down her cheeks again as she listened. The woman's words painted a picture of her grandfather that was both familiar and entirely new. She had always known him to be kind and patient, but she hadn't understood the depth of his commitment, the way he had poured his entire soul into this work. "We want to continue the program," Michael said, glancing at Sarah for confirmation. She nodded vigorously. "We're not sure exactly how yet, but we don't want what he built to disappear. Can you help us?" Mrs. Chen's response was immediate and enthusiastic. "Absolutely. I'll do whatever I can. The community needs this. These children need this. When can we meet?" They arranged to meet the following afternoon at the barn. Mrs. Chen said she would bring some of the parents and possibly a few of the children who had been part of the program. She wanted them to say goodbye properly, to understand what had happened, and to know that Walter's legacy would continue. After the call ended, Michael and Sarah sat in the quiet barn, the magnitude of what they had committed to beginning to sink in. Neither of them lived in Millbrook. Neither of them had teaching experience. They had jobs and lives elsewhere. But as Sarah looked around at the shelves of books, at the small chairs and the drawings on the walls, she knew they would find a way. They had to. "I could work remotely from here," she said, thinking aloud, "at least for a while. The house is paid off, and I could use Grandpa's money to cover expenses. I could run the Saturday sessions, maybe even expand to other days if there's interest." Michael was quiet for a moment, then nodded slowly. "I have some vacation time saved up. I could stay for a few weeks, help get things organized, reach out to potential volunteers. Maybe we could set up a non-profit, make it official, find funding so it doesn't all fall on one person." They spent the rest of the afternoon making lists, brainstorming ideas, feeling their way toward a vision of what Walter's reading barn could become. They talked about renovating the space slightly, maybe adding better heating for the winter months, updating some of the furniture, creating a website where parents could sign up their children. They discussed reaching out to local businesses for book donations, to the library for partnership opportunities, to retired teachers who might want to volunteer their time. As the sun began to set, painting the interior of the barn in shades of amber and gold, they stepped outside for a break. The air had grown cooler, and the first hints of evening were settling over the property. Sarah leaned against the barn wall, looking back toward the house where lights were beginning to glow in the windows, though they hadn't turned them on. It took her a moment to realize that the automatic timers Walter had set were still running, still following the pattern he had established when he was alive. "He thought of everything," she said, gesturing toward the house. "Even now, it's like he's still here, still taking care of things." Michael stood beside her, his hands in his pockets, his gaze distant. "I wasted so much time being angry at him," he said quietly. "After Mom died, I blamed him for things that weren't his fault. I thought he had become cold, disconnected. I thought he didn't care about anything anymore." "He was grieving," Sarah said gently. "People grieve in different ways." "He was grieving by helping others," Michael replied, "by making sure other children had opportunities, support, love. And I was too stubborn and self-righteous to see it." He turned to look at her, his eyes red-rimmed. "I can't get those years back, Sarah. I can't tell him I'm sorry, that I understand now, that I'm proud of him." "But you can honor him," Sarah said, placing a hand on his arm. "You can make sure his work continues. That's what he would have wanted." They returned to the barn as darkness fell completely, turning on the lights that Walter had installed, simple fluorescent fixtures that hummed softly and cast everything in a clean, bright glow. The space looked different at night, more intimate somehow, like a secret garden revealed only to those who knew where to look. Sarah found a guest book on a shelf near the door, something she hadn't noticed before. Inside were messages from children and parents, pages and pages of them, spanning years. "Thank you for believing in me when no one else did," one read. "You taught my daughter that reading can be an adventure," said another. "Because of you, my son wants to be a teacher when he grows up." Each message was a testament to the impact one person could have, to the ripples that spread out from simple acts of kindness performed consistently over time. Sarah thought about her own career, the designs she created for corporate clients, the logos and advertisements that would be seen and forgotten. Nothing she had ever done had touched lives the way her grandfather's work had. "I want to do this," she said, suddenly looking up at Michael. "Not just help get it started, but really commit to it. I want this to be my life's work, the way it was his." Michael studied her face, searching for doubt or hesitation, but finding none. "Are you sure? It's a big commitment. It won't pay well, if at all." "I'm sure," she said, and as she spoke the words, she felt a certainty settle into her bones, a sense of rightness that she had been searching for without knowing it. "This is what I'm supposed to do." The next afternoon, they waited in the barn as cars began to pull up the gravel driveway, one after another, until the area in front of the building was filled with vehicles parked at odd angles. Sarah had spent the morning cleaning, dusting the shelves, arranging the tables, making sure everything looked welcoming. Michael had brought folding chairs from the house, setting them up in rows facing the center of the space where they planned to speak. Mrs. Chen arrived first, a small woman in her late 50s with short grey hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. She embraced both Sarah and Michael as if they were old friends, then stood in the doorway of the barn, taking in the space with an expression of reverent wonder. "He built something beautiful here," she whispered, "something that mattered." The families came next, parents holding the hands of children who ranged in age from about 6 to 12. Some of the kids ran immediately to the bookshelves, pulling out favorites they remembered, their faces lighting up with recognition and joy. Others stood shyly near their parents, unsure of what was happening, but sensing the emotional weight in the room. Sarah watched them, her heart aching with the bitter sweetness of it all. These were the children her grandfather had cared for, had invested in, had believed in when others might have given up on them. She saw a young boy with thick glasses carefully turning the pages of a picture book about dinosaurs, his lips moving silently as he read. She saw a girl with dark braids showing her mother a drawing that was still pinned to the wall, one she had made years ago, exclaiming with delight that Mr. Walter had kept it all this time. When everyone had arrived, about 30 people in total, Michael stepped forward to speak. He had prepared notes, but as he stood there looking at the assembled group, he folded the paper and put it in his pocket. "My father was Walter Brennan," he began, his voice steady but emotional. "And until a few days ago, I didn't know about this place. I didn't know what he'd been doing here every Saturday for 15 years. That's my failure, my loss, and I'll carry that regret with me for the rest of my life." The room was silent except for the soft rustle of children shifting in their seats. Michael continued, "But standing here now, seeing all of you, reading the letters and journals he left behind, I understand something important. My father believed that every child deserves a chance, that reading isn't just about words on a page, but about opening doors to possibilities. He built this place not for recognition or praise, but because he genuinely cared about each and every one of you." A woman in the front row wiped tears from her eyes. A man near the back nodded slowly, his arm around his daughter's shoulders. Mrs. Chen stood to the side, her hand pressed to her chest, her own eyes glistening. Sarah stepped forward next, her voice quieter but clear. "My grandfather left us this barn and everything in it. But more than that, he left us a responsibility. He showed us what it means to give without expecting anything in return, to invest in the future by investing in children. We've decided that we're going to continue his work. The Reading Barn isn't closing, it's just beginning a new chapter." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Parents came forward with questions, offers to help, donations they wanted to make. Several former students, now teenagers, shared stories about how Mr. Walter had helped them when they were struggling, how his patience and encouragement had changed the trajectory of their education. One young man, probably 17 or 18, stood and said, "I couldn't read at all when I was 7. I was supposed to repeat first grade." Mr. E. Walter worked with me every Saturday for 2 years, and by 3rd grade I was reading at grade level. I'm graduating high school this year, and I'm going to college. I wouldn't be where I am if it wasn't for him." The room erupted in applause, and Sarah felt her throat tighten with emotion. This was Walter's true legacy, not hidden away, but alive in the lives of these young people who would carry his influence forward into the world. Mrs. Chen approached them afterward with a proposal. She had been thinking about it since their phone call, she explained. She was planning to retire from teaching at the end of the school year, and she wanted to volunteer her time to help run the program. She could handle scheduling, curriculum development, volunteer coordination, all the administrative work that Sarah and Michael wouldn't know how to manage on their own. "Walter gave so much to my students over the years," she said. "This is how I can pay that forward." Over the following weeks, the transformation began. Michael stayed for 3 weeks, helping to establish the non-profit paperwork, setting up a bank account for donations, creating a simple website that explained the program's history and mission. Sarah moved into the farmhouse, converting one of the upstairs bedrooms into an office where she could do her design work during the week, while dedicating her weekends to the barn. Donations poured in, not just from local families, but from people across the country who heard about Walter's story through social media posts and local news coverage. Someone donated new furniture, child-sized tables and chairs in bright colors that matched the cheerful spirit of the space. A bookstore in the nearby city sent boxes of new releases. A heating company installed a modern system so the barn would be comfortable year-round. An electrician volunteered to upgrade the wiring and add better lighting. The first Saturday that the Reading Barn officially reopened, 43 children showed up. Sarah stood at the door, greeting each one, overwhelmed by the energy and excitement that filled the space. Mrs. Chen had recruited 6 volunteer tutors, retired teachers and college students studying education, who moved among the tables, helping children select books and work through reading challenges. Sarah found herself sitting with a small girl named Maya, who was struggling to sound out words in a beginning reader book. She watched the child's face scrunch up with concentration, then bloom into a smile when she successfully completed a difficult sentence. In that moment, Sarah understood viscerally what her grandfather must have felt, that profound satisfaction of witnessing a child's breakthrough, of being present for the moment when struggle transforms into achievement. As the morning progressed, she looked around the barn at the children reading, drawing, laughing, learning, and felt her grandfather's presence as surely as if he were standing beside her. This was his gift, not just to these children, but to her, the opportunity to be part of something meaningful, to build a life around service rather than ambition, to measure success not in recognition or wealth, but in the quiet transformation of young lives. When the last family left that afternoon, Sarah sat alone in the barn for a few minutes, letting the silence settle around her. She walked to the bulletin board where Walter's photograph still hung, the one from the newspaper article, and placed her hand gently on the frame. "Thank you, Grandpa," she whispered, "for showing me what really matters, for trusting me to carry this forward. I won't let you down." Outside, the sun was setting over the property, casting long shadows across the fields that had once seemed empty but now felt full of purpose. The barn stood strong against the evening sky, its doors open wide, no longer a place of secrets, but a beacon of hope, a testament to one man's quiet determination to make the world a little bit better, one child at a time. Sarah locked up for the night, but as she walked back toward the house, she knew she would return tomorrow, and the day after that, and for as many days as she was given. Walter had spent 15 years building something beautiful in silence. Now it was her turn to tend it, to grow it, to ensure that his legacy of literacy and love would continue for generations to come. The lights in the barn windows glowed softly as darkness fell, visible from the road below, a signal to anyone who passed by that something special existed on that hill, something worth preserving, something worth believing in. And in the morning, children would come again, as they had for 15 years, seeking stories and finding so much more, finding proof that they mattered, that their voices deserved to be heard, that someone cared enough to show up, week after week, ready to listen and believe. Thank you so much for watching this story about Walter and the incredible legacy he left behind. If this touched your heart, please subscribe to our channel and become part of our community. We share stories like this every week, reminders that kindness exists in quiet places, that ordinary people do extraordinary things when they commit to serving others. We'd love to hear from you in the comments. Have you ever been surprised by someone's hidden acts of kindness? Has a teacher or mentor changed your life in ways you didn't understand until later? Share your stories with us. This community thrives on these connections, on recognizing the helpers and healers among us who work without recognition. And here's a question to reflect on. What did you learn from Walter's story? What will you carry forward into your own life? Sometimes the greatest lessons come not from what people say, but from what they quietly do, day after day, when no one is watching. Let us know your thoughts. Hit that subscribe button, share this video with someone who needs to hear it, and remember that you too have the power to change lives in ways you might never fully realize. Thank you for being here, and we'll see you in the next story.